what's going on, guys? This is Doug back again, the Abstract Recording Studios in Los Angeles, and today we're going to do a video kind of describing some of the quantization features in Logic. If you're unfamiliar with what quantization is or quantizing, what it is it's the ability to conform some kind of MIDI that you've played from an instrument to a grid. You know, we are human, we are fallible. Very, very few of us have perfect rhythm, and I don't think anybody really has the ability to hit things, on a grid perfectly every single time. So quantizing is a quick way to get some uniformity and put things on a grid after you've played it. So it's going to be kind of a long video. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to get right into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start playing some things. I'll do a very, very simple 4/4 pattern, kick snare, and I'm using Battery here. Battery is a Native Instruments drum plugin, and it comes with preset with a bunch of different kits here. Logic does offer us a lot of different tools. But the Native Instruments bundle gives you, just that much more flexibility and different sounds that you can choose from there. So I wanted to hear you guys to hear kind of some of the sounds that are there, just to give you an idea of kind of what other plugins are out there. But all the stuff I'm showing you is accessible, using Logic's drum machines and things like that. So let's get to it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and record a quick 4/4 kick snare pattern. Okay, so that was a mess. Kind of played it sloppy on purpose just to, so you guys can kind of see what this thing is capable of doing. But you'll see there's some of them that are, drastically, away from our grid value. This one here, really far away. What I did was I played these purposely in quarter notes. So quarter notes gives us, you remember there's 4 quarter notes in a measure, and I got kind of way off time here, but because we're going to quantize this in quarter note value, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my my piano roll to quantize 2 quarter notes. And if your piano roll window isn't available to you, you can get to it really quickly by selecting the region that you want and hitting P. P gives you the piano roll, or you can double click the region that you're in, and it will bring that up as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select all of the stuff I just played, and then we're going to again change your note value to quarter notes, and then I'm going to quantize it, and you'll notice that it moves all of the stuff I just played to the nearest possible value that's within the range of what we selected. So it actually lined this up very, very well. Okay, so I actually liked this as an accident, and then I kind of tried to reduplicate it. This sample here, I actually like where it's at. So I'm going to move it so it goes to the rest of our song here. And, that's just production in general. That's what we like to call happy accidents. Sometimes you'll be, really focusing on something and trying to, create something, and you'll do something by accident where you're like, oh, that's cool, and you end up keeping it. So we'll get rid of this one. Put this one. Okay, so now what we want to do is we definitely want to add, some hi-hats or something to this to make it a little bit more interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over, a lot of times you'll start with something small like this. Your fingers can only, play so many instruments. So, a lot of times you'll record stuff like this in layers. Another way to do this, and probably the way that your mix engineer would want you to do this, if you actually have a mix engineer, or for yourself later, is to separate each instrument. If you're separating each instrument, you have complete control over, what is going on with that instrument. You can EQ it differently, you can press it differently, you do all that. We'll get into that stuff later. Sometimes you'll just have all your drums on one track, and you'll do all of your EQ and your compression actually in the drum machine, and you're able to do that with the Native Instruments plugin that I've got here. You're also able to do that with some other things that Logic offers as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. For this example, we're going to go ahead and just build on top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change my record settings. So I'm right-clicking the record button here, and I think normally it looks something like this: create take folder or something like that. I think it's this one. That's normally not create take folders where this one's at normally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to merge and overlap with selected regions. And what that does is it says, okay, when I select a region like this, we're going to hit the record button, and then we're going to actually record on top of this region, and it's going to add it currently. If I don't have that on and I don't have the merge option selected, if I record from here, it's going to overwrite what was on my MIDI region, what I had recorded previously. So let's play around with some very simple hi-hat patterns. Okay, so you can see that these are eighth notes is what I played, and the way I can tell that is because I basically split each quarter note into two, and when you do that, you obviously get an eighth note. So I'm going to go ahead and change my grid value to eighth notes here if you haven't already done that, and then I am going to select all of these keys. Now I can do this a multitude of different ways. I only want to select my hi-hat strike. So the way I can do that really quickly is I can actually just select the key over here on the piano roll, and you'll see that it selected all of the notes that are on that key, and then I can hit quantize, and it puts them on the grid. And you can see how the velocity that we actually added by not hitting it, super hard every single time, actually gives it a kind of a little pulse to it. So, which is kind of cool. It's something it's an artistic choice there. So real easily, you saw how, I don't know, a very quick time we were able to just record some stuff and and get it onto the grid. So now let's talk about secondary note values. Your basic note values are going to be whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, 32nd note, and 64th note. And for those of you that like, trappy hats, that you'll use those 32s and those 64s in that capacity there. So, other things that we can do are I guess non-traditional kind of note divisions, and those would be triplets and that sort of stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to conform things to a triplet grid, so you guys get a sense of what that looks like, sounds like, and that sort of thing. And right here you can see our triplet options. Right, it gives us half note triplets, which are divides one measure into three regions, or 1 and 3. Quarter note obviously gives us 1 and 6, and then each one is going to double after that. So let's go ahead and just do a quick drum pattern that actually does require a triplet grid. And the two songs that I can think of that have a kick and snare triplet pattern are like Michael Jackson, "The Way You Make Me Feel," do 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 cha do 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 cha do 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 ch. And same drum beat is for the Black Keys. Anyways, let's go ahead and try and do our best to record the triplet pattern and then use our quantization to conform that to the grid. Okay, that gives us 5 bars of that. I'll actually shrink this down to 4. That's where we're going to kind of build our loops off of, either 4 or 8 bars. So you can see that these are kind of way off the grid. This one was pretty late here. So what we'll do is, first and foremost, we're going to change this so that our grid value reflects what we're looking at. And the way I change my grid value is by coming up here. You can actually change and customize your toolbar in Logic. If you hit, I always keep mine on custom. I think normally it looks something similar to this if you haven't changed it yet. But you'll see that this doesn't give you access to the grid values here. So if I change it to custom, and then you can see over in this section here, I do have the ability to change my grid values on the piano roll editor. And actually, if I zoom in here, I'll see those same grid values reflected. So if I move these to eighth note triplet grid values, I'll change my note value over here to eighth note triplet grid value, and then I will I will quantize, so I can hit select all and then quantize based on that, and then you can hear kind of what we have. If I loop that, it sounds something similar to this. Makes sense? Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to add some hi-hats to that, and we'll add the hi-hats in the kind of reflecting that same triplet pattern. So we were pretty far off there as well, but what we'll do is we'll grab all of those triplets, and then we'll move those onto our eighth note grid. And then let's press play. And again, the change in velocity gives us a nice little kind of like a swung kind of pulsating feel, which I think definitely works for this kind of drum beat. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so let's talk about other things that our quantization window gives us access to. So you've seen the traditional grid values, the triplet grid values, and now let's talk a little bit about this swing. Okay, swing essentially is, a basic 16A swing is a triplet grid. That's what it is. It's a 16th note triplet grid. But what if you move the 16B, 16C, 16D, what it does is it actually makes those grid values further apart. What do I mean by that? The best way to teach you this is just to, can I show you really? The idea of, swing timing comes from, back in the 40s, I guess, when swing music was, a big deal. What they would, conductors would write music in regular note values. They would use straight up eighth notes, and then, not necessarily on a triplet grid. But you knew, in compositions, when it was listed as being swung or having swing, that you would play it, play the eighth notes a little closer together and creating some space in different areas so that it had this kind of swung feel to it. And the reason why it gives us several different options is, there's kind of a lazy swing wherein the notes are, kind of further apart, and then or closer together rather, and then there's a more up-tempo swing where the notes are kind of further apart. If this isn't making sense, I promise it will when I'm done here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new channel strip, a software instrument. For this, I'm just going to do a bass line, kind of a swing style bass line, and I'll actually use a channel strip setting that Logic offers here. I'm going to use the acoustic bass patches. We'll use like a dark, upright jazz bass, something to that effect. So what I'm essentially going to play is going to sound like this. And you can hear those notes kind of being together. Do 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 do. Is that it's swung? It's not. Like it would be straight up. So the swing is the something to that effect. You know what? I just realized this is kind of peaking. Hopefully that didn't blast your ears too much. I'll turn this down here. But let's go ahead and try to record it, and then we'll use one of these swing quantize grids to fix the mess that I do right now. Okay, so there is, you can kind of see it's got that swing kind of feel to it. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and select all of these. Make sure it's played right. We'll get rid of this last note. We select all these and see if we can actually just move them over to an 8th note grid. It's a little closer to what I had kind of in my head, actually, so. Let's actually come down here to E. So you can see, and that actually sounds pretty close to kind of what we were hoping to shoot for. And so you're gonna make mistakes like that. It's just about playing around with stuff until you're getting it to kind of the way you want it to sound. So please feel free to check that stuff out and kind of go deeper in here. These other options here, we already the other options here that Logic gives us are. We can do 5 tuplets, which actually is 5 notes in a period of 1 measure. You can do 5 notes in 2 measures. You can do 7 notes or 9 notes in 1 measure. And so that's just, it's really, really fast stuff. I can't say that I've ever used them. The other option are if I have multiple inputted multiple values like 16th notes and 8th notes, it's going to read the note position and it will actually quantize both. That's what these last 3 are. So definitely experiment with those too. Okay, real quickly, I want to get into something else. What you saw was piano roll quantization, but remember Logic also gives us the ability to quantize per region. And as soon as I select a region, a host of things become available over here in the inspector window. Now, if you don't have this viewable, here's kind of how you make your inspector window viewable. But we can actually quantize with the same values here using these note values here. And then you can do something called creating groove templates, which is really, really fun. And I will actually show that in a separate video. It's a great way to use, if you have something that you like, you can use, you can record that groove template and you can use it in, other songs with different sounds and things like that. It's great for layering as well. If you have one drum beat that you really, really, really like, you can create a groove template and use that in another layer as well. So don't be afraid to experiment with those things as well. what I'd like to show you really quickly is that quantization is not limited to MIDI. You can actually quantize audio as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab an arbitrary drum loop, the first one that pops up here. Let's do that. It's like a straight up kind of beat here. We'll actually, well, let me zoom in on it and kind of see what it's doing with our grid. So we'll mute this first channel here. It's 1 bar loop. So I like the way it is, but let's say I wanted it, swung. What I can do is I can turn on what's called flex. And what flex does is it actually records kind of where things are on my grid, and I can actually use quantization to move things around. So here's our audio channel in here. We're going to go ahead and change our grid value to 16th notes, and you can actually see here that each one of these falls on a 16th note. So if I wanted to add a little bit of swing, maybe conform it to a triplet grid, I could come over here, set with the region selected, and I could change over to a triplet grid using maybe 12th note triplet, or excuse me, 8th note triplets, and you'll see that it's now moved all of these over. So now let's hear how it sounds. So we get this kind of swung feel to it now, and when obviously it didn't sound like that before. Very straightforward. Just choose that swing. So this is awesome. What this is really helpful for is if you're ever doing any live recording. If you're doing recording, maybe you're recording drums or something like that, and the drummer's not playing on time. I mean, this is a very simple way to put your drummer back, on time, rather than having to go in and actually physically move, each note around or doing something to that effect. This is a quick way to do that. So that's it for this video, guys. Stay tuned for lots more. Thanks.